All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, taking time out of your middle of your day. My name is Monica Scudieri, and thank you very much. Today's presentation is about finances, and not just about any finances, but how we tie our home finances and building that strong foundation so that we can get to building our business. How many people here have already started or are thinking about starting a small business? Just a quick show of hands. All right, so a few of you, great. So you guys have already see some of the heartache that can come with, and so it's a really interesting thing. But I have found that in my research, statistically. I think we all have heard the statistics of new businesses, and the first 5 years, 50% of them go out of business. And there are several reasons for that, depending on the part of the country you're in or even the industry. But really across the board, no matter what industry you're in or what state you're in, the number one reason is a running out of cash flow or not managing the cash flow. And that is actually true for so many things, right? And so I actually am a personal finance coach. Probably should have said that in the beginning, but I'm also an author. I published a book in 22 called Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence. And in it, I talk about my own journey to financial independence. And it started when I went through my own divorce. Don't mind telling you, I started with $257,000 of debt. Half of that was the mortgage. I had the house, and my kids were in preschool and kindergarten. That was in 2008, so about 15 years ago, and there were a lot of unemployment days. I was actually on unemployment for 2 years in the first 5 years of that journey, but 10 years total time is what it took me to get to financial independence. And I wrote the book. It documents those 10 years, and I group it into phases where at the end of each phase, I give exercises so that anyone can get to their own definition of financial independence. Today, I'm actually going to be focusing on phases 0, 1, and 2 out of 5 phases. In phase 0, we talk about your why and your vision of, so for example, when I started my journey, it was after the divorce, and the dust started to settle, and I started to calculate out, to figure out how much debt do I have, and what levers do I have to pull. And it was at that moment that I realized that being unemployed and being a single parent with no family in the area, it was going to be really hard to find employment. And so my why to get to financial independence was because I did not want to be dependent on a paycheck again. It's a very vulnerable position to be in. And so that became my why, which is really important to establish, because in life, we have peaks and valleys. And when you're going through those hard times, you're going to need something to carry you through and keep your eye focused on your goal. And so keeping that available where I could read it every day kept me moving forward and driving me. So I would say, first of all, establish your why, establish goals for yourself, and stick to those goals. Put them up someplace where you can read them, make them SMART goals. The more specific and bound with time that you can measure, the better off you'll be. And then those goals are things that can change. And as you go through your year, you might even find that you're going to take some things out and put some things out because maybe opportunity comes up. I would also say that you don't be discouraged if the first thing you try doesn't work out. I actually tried several businesses before I actually landed on real estate and investing in index funds. And that became my special thing. I really enjoy real estate. So that became a business. And eventually I found jobs, and I eventually was able to invest in more property. So that is in phase 1. This is very rough.
Doing great.
But and then so I was phase 0. In phase 1, it's in the book. I use my the idea of making a pie, right? And so everybody knows what a pie is, right? And when we talk about financial independence, I like to use this analogy of a pie because everybody can understand it. We all like different kinds of pie. My favorite is apple pie, but maybe you like peach pie, or maybe you like sweet potato pie. And it doesn't really matter what the pie is because the filling is going to be different for each of us. Financial independence is very much the same way. What I like real estate, may not be the same thing that you like. And so there may be other ways for you to build your financial independence and income streams. And incidentally, very interesting is that the average self-made millionaire has 7 or more income streams. So 7 or more ways that he or she create their pie filling. But before you can get to this pie filling, really important, which is in phase 1, is to build this solid crust. And there's 4 ingredients that I like to focus on that really will help you, put you in a great position to build your income streams. The first thing is your credit history. Why is this important? Well, because your credit history has a direct correlation to your credit score. It's important that you check this once a year. We are at historical rates of people getting their identity stolen and running up all kinds of craziness on your credit history. So it's important to check it and make sure everything on it is in fact yours. And if it's not, to make sure you address that right away. Anything that's negative that gets addressed and removed can have a very positive impact on your credit score, which is your next thing we're going to talk about, is your credit score. So your credit score is the way you get loans. The better your credit score, the better interest rate you're going to get, and the better quality loans, the better leverage you have. So that is really important. How do you do that? Pay your bills on time and in full. Those are the 2 things that you can do that have the biggest impact. There are other things here as well, but those 2 things, like there are other things like the length of time that you have a credit card. The longer you have one, the better it is. The shorter, opening and closing credit cards can have eventually a negative impact on your credit score. But truly, the 2 most important things are paying your bills on time and in full. The third thing that's pretty easy to calculate is your net worth. Now, this can be a little scary if you've never done it, because we see all the time articles, well, in your 30s, you should have a net worth of this, or you should have this much saved. I find those to be too general because there are too many things left out. The amount of money saved in New York may be very different for somebody that's doing a job in Iowa. And it also depends on the type of job you have or how much money you're saving, your lifestyle. There's so many things. So I wouldn't get too hung up on that. But calculating your net worth gives you a pretty good idea of where you are. The first time I did this exercise, it took me like 2 weeks because I was so afraid of what I was going to find out after the divorce. But once I did, the fear of the unknown was much greater than what actually happened. And what was important for me to remember here, and I would encourage you as well, is when you think about your net worth and you see it on paper, it is just a point in time. Just like the stock market goes up and down, the home values go up and down, your net worth is going to do the same thing. And the good news is that you have the control and the power to make this what you want it to be. Because the truth of the matter is that nobody's coming to save you. We don't know if Social Security is going to be there. There is no job security anymore. Layoffs happen all the time, every year. So even if you have a permanent job, you could be laid off. And so it's really important to always work on your net worth and not to sacrifice your joy today, but you do need to think about planning for your security tomorrow. Which brings me to my 4th point, which is your cash flow. And this is actually where I said, if you're going to do any homework and ready for this conversation, this is where I think would be a good thing to do. Now, for those of you that recorded your cash flow for the last few weeks, I think you're going to understand and get more out of this. But if you haven't, don't worry about it, because I'm just going to give you a little extra homework for you to do. Now, the homework was to record your cash flow, but don't change any of your money habits. So if you remember in phase 0, we talked about your why, your vision for your life. For those of you that did the homework, when you look at your spending, does your spending reflect and is money going toward the things that bring you joy, the things that are important in your life, where you see your life going? For all of us, it happens where the things that bring us joy, the things that are important to us, the vision that we have, but where we spend our money, sometimes there's a big gap in between. And sometimes it's a small gap, and sometimes it's a really big gap. But that's why recording your cash flow is so important, because it really paints a picture and tells a story about where your money goes. Maybe you're going out to eat more than you thought. Maybe you're spending more on groceries more than you thought. Maybe you're spending money in areas that you don't even have, that you didn't even realize you were spending money on. Subscriptions come to mind. That's a real big one. But the important thing is that cash flow is different for all of us. So for someone who is married but doesn't have children, is going to be very different from a single person in their 20s, is going to be very different from a married couple with 3 kids and a mortgage. So the cash flow is what we look at first before we do a budget. The cash flow tells the story. The reason why people get upset and budgeting gets such a bad rap is because we think we know what we're spending, especially a single person or a single parent with 1 kid. You're the only one spending money, so automatically it's an easy assumption that you know where your money is going. But the fact of the matter is that you don't. You don't unless you do this exercise. If you don't do this exercise and just build a budget based on what you think, that's where budgeting gets a bad rap, because you start feeling like you can't spend any money, all the joy is being sucked out, the budget is too restrictive, and that is why budgeting is seen in such a negative light. But if it's done correctly, based on what you're spending, where it makes sense, because when you start seeing your cash flow, chances are you're going to make some adjustments so that money goes toward things that bring you joy, that align more with what's important in your life and the vision you have for it. But it's also going to be able to plan for tomorrow's security. And so that's why this is so important. The best thing about a budget is that it is a flexible living document. So let's say you're in your 20s and you build a budget, and then let's say in your late 20s you get married. Your budget's going to change, but every year you need to revisit it. As a matter of fact, I revisit mine midway through the year, and I make adjustments based on what I see going on that year, because you are always learning and evolving. Things are changing. And so the important thing to know is to keep it flexible so that you're still supporting. Now, the one thing I will say is that when you're looking at your categories, right, you're going to see your slices of your pie, right? And so when you have a slice that goes to, let's say, mortgage, and it's going to be all this, well, that's fine, but know that you only have now this much left to handle utilities, clothes, dining, restaurants, whatever it is, and all of these other things. So as you're spending, your slices or your categories will get smaller or bigger based on what you're spending, but it also can take away from other slices. So if you're finding that you're spending more than what the size of your pie, then you either need to make smaller slices or you need to make a bigger pie, right? How do you make a bigger pie? Well, we talked about your income streams and what that looks like. Self-made millionaires, 7 income streams. The big ones are paycheck jobs, interest, dividends, investing in a business, which is a lot of you are here for. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can make this pie bigger. Don't forget that in your pies, you have to have a slice to build for tomorrow's security. And if you're going to build a business, then we can start talking about sinking funds. And these are things that I would say to look into, because it helps when you use something like this for things that you're saving for, like a car, or building a cushion for a business, or a house, or a repair. Sinking funds are a wonderful way to manage that money or vacation, so that you don't have like this big bill that comes and you got to figure out where the money needs to come from. But if you're saving every month, little by little, then it's time to pay that bill, you just pull it from that sinking fund. So these are a wonderful tool to use. And just like Ally Bank actually has a wonderful way, they're very sinking fund friendly, because you can open up one account and then make a bunch of smaller accounts underneath it and give them all different labels. And then you can just pay them all every month, and you'll have money being saved up for different things that are important to you. So these 4 things make up what is your solid crust. And depending on how big your filling is going to be, this can accommodate any filling. The last thing I'm going to say are the tools that we use. A lot of people don't think about it like this, but money is in fact a tool. It is a tool that we use, and we trade it for things that are important. We trade it for time. We trade it because you can't live under money. You can't build a house out of it. You can't wear it, although some movie stars would disagree. And you can't eat it. We trade these things for things that are going to be important for us, with your needs or wants. But if you think about money as nothing more than a tool, and how you can leverage that for things that are important to you, and think really about the things that are important, you would find that it does make things easier when you sit down and really think about that kind of stuff. But none of this happens overnight. It took me 10 years. Other people, it could take 15. But the beauty of this type of a system is that it doesn't take 40 and 50 years, that it gives you that independence, that freedom to say, oh, you know what, this job isn't what it used to be, it's time for me to quit. And you can quit without having to worry about having your bills paid every month, because you're building up your emergency fund through this cash flow measuring, through sinking funds. You're putting yourself in a position where you can leverage and do different things that make sense for you. So thank you very much for your time. And I know that was a lot, and I have other phases, but if you're interested, the book documents everything. Or you can always reach out. I'm happy to talk to you and answer any other questions. So thank you.